incredibly excited to be with you here today. We are very lucky to have a special guest with us, Jim Jones, who is the founder, executive director, and senior trainer at the Community Justice Center in Lincoln, Nebraska. The Justice Center is an absolute leader in restorative justice, and we are thrilled to have Mr. Jones here to talk to us about the founding of this organization, how he grew the nonprofit, but also to help us get a better understanding of what restorative justice really is and how it can help not only the folks who are involved in the justice system, but also the victims and the communities at large. So welcome to the show, Jim.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. So, had a chance to read your book, obviously did a lot of research sort of about you and about the center in general. Do you think you can get started with just telling us a little bit about the Community Justice Center and what it is?
Yeah, in a nutshell, Dave, listen, the easiest way to explain this, I'm a grassroots public safety organization. So our end goal is to increase public safety by addressing the needs of victims of crime, offenders, justice-involved individuals, and communities. So restorative justice and what I do is basically address the needs of all three stakeholders who are key players and stakeholders in our communities. It's simply a grassroots public safety organization. I basically started this when I was, I'm a former incarcerated person. I did time for robberies. During the crack epidemic back in the 80s, I became addicted to crack and committed robberies. And Dave, I served a 3 to 5 prison sentence in Nebraska penal system. So this volunteer, when I was incarcerated, Dave, came in and helped me understand how I got there by basically showing me how to take care of my emotional hygiene, I call it. We call it now the gift in class, or the $1 million check in class in the program that I teach. But it's simply, Dave, we address and clearly in a brief restorative justice program, we show individuals how their trauma or issues that they experience sort of contributed to them making bad choices, and showing them how to make proper decision making based off of their what we call emotional hygiene.
Got it.
So it's restorative justice. Most traditional restorative justice programs comes in the form of what we call victim offender dialogue sessions, where the victim, has to be initiated by the victim, approach the offender and say, hey, look, I'm trying to find some resolution, some path of healing so I can move on my road of recovery. But a lot of times offenders will not participate. It's done all over the country, and it's the number one program, victim offender dialogue, but it's grossly underused. So basically, Dave, when I got out of prison, this volunteer said, Jim, when you get out of prison, now it's your obligation to pass this on to others. So as you know, Dave, I started doing my first restorative justice program with at-risk kids and kids in trouble on probation in Lincoln. We would teach the basic principles of restorative justice, and we would do healing circles, which is another program or another basic restorative justice program where offenders are in a circle and they talk about how they were damaged, how they were harmed, and the harm they caused their victims. And then we find healing path for both of those individuals, and it worked. It was effective. So from 94 to 2001, that's all I did was work with at-risk kids and kids in trouble with the law, and it was successful. So I wanted to see if it worked with adults. So that's when I entered the prison system. At the time, Harold Clark, the director of corrections, allowed me to go inside prisons and teach it in the women's prison, the Nebraska State Penitentiary here in Lincoln, and Lincoln Correctional Center in 2001. Matter of fact, Dave, we're going to be celebrating. You got to come out for our 20th anniversary next year.
Oh, I'd love to. That's an exciting.
After COVID.
Yeah, after COVID. That's an exciting milestone. So, well, there's a lot in there, and I hope we can unpack some of that, because I think for folks, this topic of sort of
people get confused by it.
Totally.
And it's an old concept. Restorative justice, it goes back to the beginning of time. So I did not know what I was doing with those kids was restorative. They said, Jim, somebody said, you're doing kind of restorative justice work. And I said, how? Well, Jim, you going out and helping crime victims in your communities with these kids, these offenders and these at-risk kids. And but what you're doing, Jim, you're doing it in a unique way. These offenders are not directly related to these victims. They are similar crimes: robbery, burglaries, thefts, vandalism. These kids committed similar crimes or harms, I call them. So we would go out and help those victims in Lincoln. And they said, well, Jim, you're asking victims what their wants and needs are, and you're addressing it. You're helping young people develop their emotional competencies, or how to understand the damage they cause and repair the damage to other victims that have suffered similar crime, and you can help in the community. I said, well, what do you mean help in the community? Well, Jim, if you look at how many times these kids get back in trouble after your program, so we measured it, and Dave, it was a marked reduction.
That's beautiful.
And then that's when I wanted to try it with adults in 2001.
I hope you enjoyed the short segments from a recent interview I did with a good friend and colleague, Dave Nadelman. To view the rest of the interview and to learn more about the Community Justice Center, check out our social media pages and visit us at communityjusticecenter.org.